Hello, hello, Jordan Sheridan live. Status Coup, a matinee live stream on this afternoon. Going live a little bit earlier because we will be live a little bit later at 4 o'clock Eastern Time from a protest outside of Citibank in New York City. Citibank, one of many banks that does business with Israel. So John Farina will be live from there, I believe, at 4 o'clock. I am wearing my United Corporations of America shirt, and I am angry. And I felt, you know what? Maybe it's selfish, but I need a bit of a venting session this afternoon because I am fed up. I'm trying not to curse in the first minute or two of the video. I think that demonetizes it. But I am fed up. And I think we have gone from media is lazy to media is corrupt. When I say corrupt, I mean actively suppressing life and death information from people being poisoned. Let me repeat, poisoned. I don't expect this live stream to blow up. I don't even know if our normal viewers know I'm live. We sent that an email. But please smash that like button. Please share this live stream. We got to get this out to as many people as possible because I truly do not believe that the masses know how corrupt the media is. And I really thought about, do I want to do this like less than a month and a half away from my book? Because my book is coming out August 6th. Pre-order is available now. Colin, if you have the book cover. And do I really want to name names now? Because I kind of want a chance for the media to cover my book. But the truth is, I got to do it. And if the media is not going to cover the book because I call them out, then I'll have to go to independent media. Hopefully the media will cover the book, but I'm not holding my breath. The book, in my opinion, I'm biased because I wrote it and I reported it, will expose the biggest government cover-up of the 21st century. That is the Flint water cover-up. Erin Brockovich was kind enough to write the forward. I have positive comments on the back of the book from Michael Moore, former Flint Mayor Karen Weaver, Nina Turner, several journalists, and I am super excited. And right now we are planning behind the scenes book events, which hopefully I'll have something to announce soon. But I broke two, I think, fairly big, should be on the front page of most newspapers if we had a sane fucking media system in this cesspool of a country. I broke one on Monday and one on Tuesday. Crickets. And we're going to have a guest on in a few minutes from Detroit because one of the stories was published in the Detroit Metro Times, and that reporter did a follow-up. But we broke two major stories, and somehow not one of them has been picked up by the mainstream media, even though I know and I have communicated with mainstream journalists who know about the story and have confirmed it's true, but will not report on it. Why would that be? So I want to start with the first story. I broke this on Monday in the Detroit Metro Times, if you could put it up, Colin. And this is kind of an excerpt from my book. So I have a whole chapter in my book coming up on a very, very powerful foundation called the Mott Foundation in Flint, Michigan. And the Mott Foundation's alleged role behind the scenes in pulling the strings that ended up poisoning the city of Flint. And what's interesting is a lot of cities that have been destroyed in this country economically have to rely on foundations, which are supposedly charitable and benevolent, for funding for schools, for colleges, for youth centers, for hospitals, for everything in town. And unfortunately, the city of Flint has to largely depend on the Mott Foundation. And this will be reported in my book. But a couple years ago, I was at an event in Flint. We were premiering a documentary we did in 2019. And Sheldon Neely, who at the time was a state representative, he approached me, and he had announced recently at that time that he was running for mayor. So he came up to me, he sat down next to me and started talking to me. I think he knew who I was because I had been in Flint many times, and he's a politician. He didn't say, hey, are we off the record? And just so you know how the process works, somebody has to say to a journalist, hey, can this be off the record? And the journalist has to agree. So it's not enough for them to just say off the record. The journalist has to agree. He did not say to me off the record, and he just started running his mouth. And I don't think I would have agreed to keep it off the record in the first place. So he started running his mouth. And because it's legal in Michigan and it's legal in many states called one-party consent, where only one party to a conversation has to consent to record it, I discreetly pressed record on my phone. And boy, did he say a lot. So he started jabbering. And after he talked about what he wanted to talk about, I was able to shift the conversation to what I wanted to talk about. And that was the Mott Foundation. Because for years reporting in Flint, I had been told by a lot of residents who complained to me that Mott basically owns the government, this powerful foundation, which, by the way, is named after Charles Stewart Mott, who was one of the first pioneering investors at General Motors in the early 20th century. So obviously he was a wealthy man, and his family, created foundations. And to be fair, they've done a lot of good things, and they funded a lot of good programs. But based on sources, they've done a lot of bad things too. And this is not unique just to Flint. There's a lot of powerful foundations out there that are supposedly, through the marketing, benevolent and charitable. But if you look underneath the hood, they seem to be pulling the strings of United States government and making, calling the shots on government policy and basically pulling the strings of our politicians, who they then handsomely give campaign donations to and help win elections and keep getting reelected. So I asked Neely, hey, a lot of residents have been complaining to me about Mott, saying that they own the city, that, they're calling the shots, that they just want to gentrify and push poor people out, push black people out. There had been a book written in the past about Mott and outlining its kind of history with racism, allegedly its support for, redlining, which is obviously, racist housing policy, school segregation, obviously racist education policy. So this has been reported before. I simply asked then mayor candidate Sheldon Neely, hey, I'm hearing a lot about Mott. What do you say about this? I didn't bring up race. I didn't even bring up the Flint water crisis. Colin, let's play the tape of our conversation. What do you think about, a lot of residents keep complaining to me about Mott, like Mott owns Flint and Mott, basically the politicians, because Mott gives so much money, like Mott wants the crisis to be over so they could gentrify. Is that a big elephant in the room?
Did you get the civil rights study? It says the whole crisis was through systemic racism.
Yeah.
You got that? So
I know that. Okay. Yeah.
But did you read the book about the Motts and their relationship?
Yeah, I'm reading it right now.
So they don't give $100 million to a cause because they just say we want to help out.
Right.
They picked the first two emergency managers. So there's a lot that your documentary is, documents based, but they picked the first two emergency managers, which names you never hear in the criminal culpability, which is Mike Brown and Ed Kurtz. Ed Kurtz is the one that made the decision to use Flint River water. Darnell Early is the one that pulled the trigger.
I don't know. Colin, is your camera working yet? There you go.
Yeah.
I don't know. Do you think, I know you live in Texas, maybe Flint is far, far away. Do you think it's kind of a newsworthy story when the mayor of a major American city that within the last 10 years was poisoned, and it has the fastest growing cancer, one of the fastest growing cancer rates in America, and the people are sick and the water is still poisoned? If you could show that image that I tweeted out yesterday, this is the water not 10 years ago. This is the water this week. As I always tell you, residents, I mean, that's water this week. You see that brown? That's Flint, Michigan, that we're being told the water's fine. Water's clean. 10 years later, they haven't replaced all the pipes. So do you think it's kind of a newsworthy story if the mayor of the city, sure, he was running at the time, but a tape comes out where the mayor of the poison city is accusing a very powerful foundation that basically funds all of the city's programs, colleges, hospitals, youth programs, farmers markets, capital, theaters, you name it, that he's basically saying they're racist, and that he's basically saying they, not the governor at the time, but they, the foundation, basically were calling the shots. They dictated who the emergency managers were going to be. Those emergency managers who were unelected, all this talk right now in the media and the fundraising emails we're getting, democracy is at stake. Democracy is on the line. Well, here, democracy was canceled. The governor appointed unelected emergency managers who seized power from the elected mayor and city council. And here, the mayor, not knowing he was being recorded, so he kind of told the truth, is saying, yeah, no, they're the ones that selected the emergency managers. They called the shots who was appointed. Do you think that they give $100 million just because they feel like being nice? That what he's talking about is the foundation has given $100 million to Flint towards water relief, even though a lot of that money seems to be going elsewhere. But do you kind of think that's a somewhat worthy of news coverage when the mayor is accusing the most powerful foundation in the city of basically pulling strings that caused a water crisis?
Yeah, and it fits all the strings that you would think that like places like CNN and stuff would cover, which is essentially like a racist policy of this company here, but also the fact that by admitting that Mott picked the two emergency managers, it's literally a corporation took control of an entire American town.
Right. And by the way,
subverted the entire democratic process, and no one's reporting on that.
By the way, this isn't me saying it. I didn't even bring it up. I just floated it out there like a balloon. Hey, I'm hearing this about Mott. He said, did you read the civil rights report? What he was talking about there was a civil rights report about the Flint water poisoning. And its conclusion was that this was caused by systemic racism. He said, did you read this book, Demolition Means Progress? That book, which I encourage people to read, great book, had a whole chapter on Mott and its history of supporting redlining, de facto school segregation. Mott, of course, got very pissed off and challenged the book's account, but this isn't my words. This is an author, a college professor, wrote this book. And from what I can tell, it's factual. I kind of think that's a minor little story that the mayor of Flint is on tape accusing the most powerful foundation. Can you imagine if like Biden was on tape saying, oh, yeah, Wall Street pulled the strings for who Obama appointed as Treasury Secretary, or who Obama appointed as name your cabinet? Do you think that would get any coverage if Biden was on tape saying it? Now, the media wouldn't care about the substance that, Wall Street is basically selecting and running our government, but they wouldn't be able to resist. You got Biden on tape saying Obama was corrupted. Obama, Wall Street basically was calling the shots for Biden, but for Obama. But here, the mayor of Flint is accusing the most powerful foundation of Flint of at least having racist history, and basically pulling all the strings and pulling the governor's strings and dictating who would be the emergency managers. By the way, the two officials that they chose as emergency manager were both basically Mott people who had run Mott Foundation nonprofits and who had very, very strong ties to the Mott Foundation. Hence, decisions that were being made, the foundation would, shall we say, have a seat at the table. This is an opinion. This is what he's on tape saying. So I sent it. I knew that Michigan outlets weren't going to do it with me. I went to the Detroit Metro Times, which is a great Michigan outlet. It's an independent alternative outlet. So it is not funded by corporate America. It doesn't have any massive corporations that own it. So I've been able to write a couple important stories and report several important stories in the Detroit Metro Times. The good version, the good part of that is I could actually get the truth out. The bad version is they don't have as much circulation as Detroit Free Press or Detroit News. But still, people read it. So I published it in their outlet. Colin, if you have the graphic I asked for, I don't know if you had time to do it, of all the different places I sent this story to. No, that's for East Palestine. Here, that's for East Palestine, that story. Here we go. Detroit Free Press, I sent it to. Detroit News. The Flint Journal. It's in the name. Flint Journal. Flint Beat. Click on Detroit. ABC 12 Flint. A reporter responded, or the news director responded, thanks for sharing this. Well, thank you for thanking me for sharing this. How about you fucking cover it, you corrupt deadbeats? By the way, ABC 12, there's a part about you in my book, which is not going to look so kind. A big part about how ABC 12 killed a very, very important Flint water crisis story. And if they hadn't killed it, they might have actually saved lives. So I've reached out to ABC 12 about this many, many times, and they don't respond, interestingly enough. I sent this story and the audio to NBC Flint. I sent it to Fox in Flint. I sent it to CBS in Saginaw. Saginaw's near Flint. I sent it to Fox in Detroit. How many of those, Colin, do you think have covered this?
If I had to guess, at least 0 or maybe 1 if we're lucky.
And to answer your question, Outcast, if you're going to pre-order the book, which I hope you will, I've been sending the Barnes & Noble link out because stubbornly, I do not want to give business to Amazon. So the link to the pre-order is in the description under this live stream. From what I have been told by the publisher, we're doing okay on pre-orders. So the pre-order numbers are decent, but if you can pre-order the book, because the more people that pre-order the book, the faster it rises up, I guess, or the more prominent it is in the rankings on these websites. So it will rise up higher on Barnes & Noble's website, the more people that pre-order it. Right now, I am trying to set up book events in Flint, in New York, in DC, and possibly some other areas. I'm trying to organize it with some celebrities who are passionate about this, but it ain't easy to book celebrities to do an event with, period, much less in August, which is not the most opportune time. But I will have announcements. I'll definitely be in Flint when the book is released. The book comes out August 6th. So if you pre-order it now, you should have it then. But exactly 0 of those outlets have covered it. They have covered it. 0 of those outlets covered it, mind you. 0 of them covered it after it broke in the Detroit Metro Times, and 0 of them have covered it after the mayor responded. The mayor issued a statement. I'm not going to waste time reading it because it's a bunch of bullshit. But the mayor released a statement, I believe, speculation, I don't have anything to back this up with. I believe he was forced to issue a statement because, from what I was told by some sources, the foundation was very angry. So I believe the mayor issued a statement. He spun a bunch of bullshit. He said we were off the record. We were not off the record. He did not say off the record, and I did not agree. That's how it works. They have to stipulate it, and the journalist has to agree. Neither of those things happened. We were not off the record. He called me unscrupulous, which I take as a badge of honor. Thank you. I am unscrupulous for the people of Flint, and so the truth gets out. Somebody has to be. He said it was unethical to record him without him knowing. Well, I think it's unethical to poison a city and then cover it up. So I'll let the people decide which one is more unethical. And then the foundation put out a statement. Basically, he also said, the mayor said, I was mistaken with what I said back then, and now I've learned. Yada. I mean, it's on tape, so how is he going to really spin it? He said I took him out of context, which was very interesting because, Colin, you edited it. This was literally the part about Mott. I didn't take him out of context.
We didn't add anything, and like you pointed out, he's the one who brought it up. It's not like, oh, we're talking about stuff and it led to this. You could literally hear the beginning of the subject begin.
Right. He brought it up. I didn't bring up the racism. I didn't bring up the emergency managers. He did. So anyway, I could go on, and we're going to get to East Palestine in a little bit. But I wanted to bring on a guest because, like I said, even if you're not in Michigan, go subscribe or support in any way the Detroit Metro Times, because they are one of the only, literally the Detroit Metro Times has way less resources than the Detroit Free Press, the Detroit News, the Flint Journal, major, the Lansing, whatever Lansing's papers. It's an independent alternative paper. It has a website, but it's actually doing some real journalism, because even without resources, when you're not owned by corporate America and corporate America has not seized control over your newsroom, you could actually report the truth. You could actually go after the truth. I think we just lost your video, Steve. So hopefully we can get him back. Let me text him. Lost your camera. So while he's getting ready, I think it's amazing that they didn't cover this in the first place. But then after the mayor responded and issued a statement, after the foundation responded and issued a statement, Detroit Free Press won't respond, won't cover it. Detroit News won't cover it. Flint Journal won't cover it. None of the local networks, ABC, CBS, NBC, won't cover it. And why does this matter? Why should you care? You're like, what does this matter? I don't live in Flint. I don't live in Detroit, because this is the entire American media system. This is not just Flint. This happens everywhere where major, massive stories that actually can hold people accountable and save lives are broken, and the mainstream media buries it. Just text me when you think you're ready, Steve, and I'll bring you on. Okay. So joining me now is Steve Nevling. He is a reporter with the Detroit Metro Times. He was nice enough to talk to me yesterday off camera, and you wrote a follow-up to this piece. And like I said, people should read Detroit Metro Times. I published this in the Detroit Metro Times. I don't know, Steve, I didn't go to journalism school, but I was kind of taught proximity, timeliness, if it's an important figure. It seems like a story that the mayor of Flint accused a major foundation in Michigan of having a racist history, possibly having a racist present, and pulling strings that caused the worst environmental disaster in the state's history.
Yeah, it's a huge story. We're talking about the origin of the Flint water crisis. Who decided to make the appointments to the emergency manager? We know in Detroit that other people other than the governor had their hand in it. So it wasn't preposterous to think that there were people in Flint who were going to make that decision. And this is an unelected position. The emergency manager, that system helped create what became the Flint water crisis. So the idea that this new news, which is huge, that there was a very powerful organization that had a hand in pulling the strings of who would be the next emergency manager, that's significant news. And if we're going to continue telling the story of what happened and hold people accountable, we need to know these things. So the fact that you had that information and no one else covered it, to me, is just, it's journalistic malpractice. And as you say, it's probably evidence of some kind of media cover-up, because why wouldn't you cover something as important as this? It doesn't make any sense to me.
And even if you want to give him the benefit of the doubt on not covering it in the first place, which I don't, I mean, he's on tape. He's the mayor of a major American city. I didn't bring up these things. He brought it up. He then responded. He issued a statement. Then the foundation responded, which you wrote about yesterday. Everybody go check out Detroit Metro Times. You wrote about, he basically flip-flopped away from what he said, and the foundation issued a statement. They're not even covering that, which tells me, again, we're both reporters, so I'm just speculating. This isn't for fact, but there seems to be in Michigan media on reporting critically about this foundation and or continuing to report on the Flint water crisis cover-up. All the stories I see on the Flint water crisis, and there aren't many, all seem to have the same kind of tone, and it's about reestablishing trust in the community and more human interest stories about people who have suffered, but making it seem like this is something that happened in the past, not ongoing. Yet, I don't know if you saw it, there's residents still posting images of brown water that they're getting. I was just there recently. People have discolored water. People are showing me rashes, not from 10 years ago, from this week. So it seems like this is an ongoing thing. And I don't know if you got into journalism, it's the story of a lifetime. We can't say for certain, but I mean, you've seen in Detroit. It seems to me there might be some media outlets that for whatever reason have trepidation about reporting this story or reporting about this foundation.
Yeah, I mean, I think the one thing that is the most egregious to me is that the publications in Flint, the people who are reporters there, who may have lived in Flint, who know people who've been poisoned, they're the ones who are least likely to cover it out of all of the major Michigan publications. I get more tips about Flint than I do at Detroit, where we're based. We're based in Detroit. It's a larger city, but I get more tips about Flint because MLive, Flint Journal, the TV stations, no one covers Flint critically. And here is a city that is still reeling from a very serious disaster, still has a lot of money problems. I have a very good friend who was a TV reporter there, and they told her, you cannot write critically on city government. And she quit. And that's unheard of in journalism. I don't know of anybody who says, I'm going to go to journalism school so I can write a bunch of fluff pieces so that my corporate masters say, good job, you got us some money today. It's
so
just,
to be clear, she was told you cannot write critically, even if you have facts to support it about city government.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, she gave me information that she couldn't report on that I was able to report on because she wasn't able to. And here we are, 2 hours from Flint, and we're the only publication writing about this stuff. It's insane. And I think that I used to work for MLive, and it really shocks me how far they have fallen. I mean, you have such a great responsibility when you're a journalist at a struggling city like that. People are struggling, and it's in places like that where there's no coverage. That's what breeds corruption. And that's what's going to continue to happen.
Well, I will say, I mean, this is just a fact. You could look it up. MLive, which is the Flint Journal, I believe in the 2010s, relocated, and they are now in a downtown Flint building that is owned by a Mott-funded real estate company. They are renting space in downtown Flint. This is the Flint Journal. They are renting space from a Mott-funded real estate company. I understand that journalists have to eat and feed their family. I get it. And I am not saying although I have had some run-ins with certain reporters at the Flint Journal, but the bottom line is I have literally presented the Flint Journal, the Detroit Free Press, the Detroit News with confidential documents that I obtained from the criminal investigation that found Governor Snyder knew about the Legionnaires outbreak a year and a half earlier than he notified the public. None of them would touch it. I told you about this. I met with an editor from the Detroit Free Press in a parking lot in the beginning of COVID. I handed him the documents. He said to me, and I quote, "This is major." 3 days later, I got an email. "We don't have the resources." Detroit News has gaslit me that when I send them stories that are news, are new, including the fact that the Detroit Free Press, Governor Snyder's top officials deleted their phones right before the launch of the criminal investigation. He told me, "Isn't this old news?" It's like, can you send me the link to this story that's been out there? Of course, it wasn't old. It was new.
You're talking about the two largest publications in Michigan. They have resources.
Yes.
They have plenty of resources. I used to work at the Free Press. There are plenty of resources, and you always have resources. I mean, we have at the Metro Times, we have about a 20th of the size that they do, and we cover the Flint water crisis 10 times more than those publications do. And that speaks volumes about where you find what you value or what you don't value. And
Right.
They're not putting value in the lives of Flint residents.
And I think why this is so important, this shit happens not just in Flint. I mean, you've had your instances in Detroit. I don't know if you want to share that, but
Sure.
you worked at the Detroit Free Press.
Yeah.
And they fired you over what I think was you factually reporting.
Yeah, I mean, we had a white editor at the Free Press. He was the top editor who was from Iowa. He came from Iowa, comes to this predominantly black city and has ideas of what he wants to do with this newspaper. Well, when the prospect of an emergency manager was coming up in meetings, I was the one that was covering the emergency manager. Who was going to be covering, because I covered City Hall. And I saw city council members violating the Open Meetings Act, meeting with the governor behind closed doors to try to get this emergency manager in, who's unelected, against the wishes of residents. And somebody on Facebook said on the day that the council was to vote on the emergency manager, said, "The fix is in." I just typed 3 words, "It appears so." I got called into the office, berated, was told again and again we're not to speak critically of the emergency manager in Detroit. And 3 days later, I was fired. And that, to me, and that is why, I mean, I started an independent news site after that, because I was so outraged that one of the biggest stories of my life, I mean, we talk about, just like you were saying earlier in the show, we talk about what's going on with democracy right now and the dangers. This is legitimately taking away people's right to choose their government. And the Free Press was saying, and when I say the Free Press, I should just say Paul Anger, who was the editor there, because there were a lot of people who disagreed with him, said we're not going to call this anything but oversight, which we know it wasn't. It wasn't oversight. They got rid of resources. They gutted retirees' benefits without any ability of voters to say a damn thing about it. So that, to me, was it. I mean, I'm done with that type of corporate media, because what does some white guy from Iowa know about the struggles of people in Detroit?
But I think it's more insidious than that. If you could share,
Yeah.
From what we talked about, he felt that if covering it critically, then he felt basically the economy was tanking.
That's right.
And if the economy in Detroit, and this was like at a time when the economy the country was tanking. It was
That's right.
2007, 8, 9, 10, the financial crash. Detroit lost a lot of money as a result of stupid ass government policy that did a lot of those credit default swaps. And they lost a lot of money because of the financial crash. And this editor, instead of thinking like a journalist, he thought like a government official.
Yeah.
And what did he had said something like,
yeah, he said, if Detroit dies, so do we. And when he's saying that, he doesn't mean like literally dying. He's saying that if Detroit's economy collapses, if the city government collapses, if the city's no longer able to pay for services, we at the newspaper are no longer going to be able to survive. And this is Gannett that owns it, the largest print company in the U.S. And this is, a guy who has done that throughout his career, came to Detroit and did the same thing. That's not something you consider when writing a story, is what is it going to do to our newspaper? I've never been told at the Metro Times, no, we shouldn't write about this because we're worried about X and X advertiser. That's just not how it works. And how can anybody trust a newspaper, the state's largest one, when you're allowing the economy to dictate how you're writing a story, when it's something as serious as your democracy at stake?
And by the way, I think people should know, because you perhaps don't know, but emergency managers were not just put in Flint. They were put in Detroit, a lot of other cities in Michigan, predominantly black cities.
Yeah.
So this was throughout Michigan. It wasn't just a Republican thing. Democratic governors appointed emergency managers. So when they say running government like a business, that's what it looks like.
Yeah, Highland Park had an emergency manager. They don't have schools anymore. There are no schools in Highland Park that are public. They demolished their high school. That's what an emergency manager does.
Right.
That's serious shit. And when you have people in their ivory towers sitting up as an editor saying, from my suburbs, well, it looks pretty fine here. Who gives a shit about the people who have to lose their children's education? It's an easy decision for them. What's going to make our newspaper make the most money? That's sickening.
And, I think not just in local media, but national media, I'm sure you would agree, there's something called the narrative. Yeah. And I think there's been a lot of money poured in to put out a narrative that the Flint water crisis is over.
That's right.
It's in recovery.
Right.
Well, Colin, put it back up. This is not the first image I have posted of dirty water now in Flint. This was 2 days ago. That's brown. Okay. Little Miss Flint on the 10-year anniversary posted images holding up brown jugs from water now. It's not citywide like it was 10 years ago, but there's still significant parts of the city that get brown water, that get smelly water, and you don't have to be an expert to understand why. 10 years later, they have not replaced all the damaged pipes. Jesus can bless the water, Steve. It could come out brand new, beautiful from the water plant. But if it's going through still corroded pipes that inside look like a disease is crusting, then stuff's going to leach off and get into the water. Not to mention, they haven't even fully replaced the service lines, which go from your curb into your home. They haven't replaced that, but they haven't touched residents' interior plumbing. So even if the water is great coming into your home, all the residents' interior plumbing is busted because they basically had acid going through their pipes. I don't know. I didn't go to journalism school, and I think that's a plus, frankly. But if I saw that water is still contaminated in Flint, I'd get in the car and I'd drive down there and I'd talk to residents, because that's a major story to break. Hey, it's not over.
And reporters doing the same thing, right? That they did at the beginning, which is they didn't believe the residents. So when this first happened, residents were doing everything they could to get the attention of the politicians. When that didn't happen, they tried to do everything they could to get to the media. And we now know from emails that when the leaders of the community at the time, which were black pastors, saying, our children are being poisoned, and no one was believing them, behind the scenes, Snyder and his cronies were emailing and mocking these people as if the community leaders couldn't be trusted. I could not imagine this happen if we had a bunch of white ministers stand up in some affluent suburb and said, our water is brown, we have rashes, people are getting sick. There would be a media circus all over that. And that, to me, is just stunning. It's an indictment of where we are in journalism today, and it's going to continue to get worse.
I want to play this clip. I don't know if you know this, but we recently did a documentary. It takes an out-of-state reporter to do a documentary on Flint, But we recently did a documentary. It's up for free. Go to flintfatigue.com, flintfatigue.com. And I want to play this section particularly about the media because I think it's powerful. It's a little long, but I'll cut it off at a certain point. I believe the media is complicit in this because a community could only be left to die slowly if the people that are supposed to be exposing it are asleep at the switch. What is the media's role in this still being a crisis 10 years later?
So the media, especially the national media, has been a double-edged sword. We're seeing all of it and living all of it every single day. And we have been in this prison sentence, in this death sentence for 10 years and counting because nobody will listen to us, nobody will cover us. We just had a federal judge agree with us and hold the city of Flint in contempt, in civil contempt of federal court, which is huge. That's so rare that it happened. And everything that we were saying, the judge said, everything the plaintiffs have said is correct. They have not put in the effort, the will to finish this, and they have violated the settlement agreement to replace the pipes. So I was expecting my phone to blow up like it normally would, and I was ready with my statement. Hardly anyone did. And then I'm seeing basically like some of the state radio stations and local radio stations and news stations just repeating and regurgitating, like you said, the city's press release with their excuse. Nothing from us, nothing from the people, not interviewing or talking to residents. It's horrifying. So then basically all the people are going to see is they were held in contempt, and then the city saying, oh no, we're fine, we didn't do anything wrong, even though the judge said they did. But how many people are going to go in and read the 30-page judge's, the court order? But Flint and so many other communities like Flint are dying at the hands of these corporations and these governments, and everybody would rather talk about who's wearing what fashion and where's Kate Middleton and where's her ring and this photo editing controversy. I'm like, we're dying. Hello?
Trump's tweets or truth socials.
Oh my God, we all know it's madness, so why are you covering it? If you stop giving him attention like we do with toddlers, then maybe he'll go away, because that's what's happening to us. They're no longer giving us attention, so we're dying quieter and not by choice.
Why isn't the media, the whole United States, isn't there somebody out there besides you? Isn't there enough people dying for a political gain? Not from us. We are dying. You guys are next. Why don't you stand up, man? Stand up. I'm serious.
Once you get outside of the city of Flint, I don't think that the local media has really even kept up with any important news stories, except for the most. You will see when there is a salacious story, the local news outlet may jump on it, or like sort of the Detroit Lansing news outlets may jump on that. But often it's very cynical. Often it favors, I think, in my opinion, often those narratives favor the defendants that are involved. I don't think that that coverage is often very much in the interest of Flint residents. It's often, I'm an outsider, here's what I think is important about the Flint water crisis, not what are Flint residents concerned about, what are the things that they think are concerning. And oftentimes you'll see in those articles, they don't even really interview a resident. So.
Right. And I think, as we both know, there's a difference between checking a box and saying, hey, we sent a reporter to cover a protest, and actually investigating who knew what when. And that's what I think has been lacking, the actual investigative reporting. Sure, lack of resources at a lot of outlets, but I'll tell you, I'm not even from Michigan, and I've been able to uncover things that residents were handing over to local outlets that they just didn't want to look into, it seemed.
Yeah, I would say, like, overall, there's very much.
And now, I don't know if you've ever seen this, Steve. I want to show you possibly my favorite moment of the last 5 years. When I went down to the Flint Journal, I had a pamphlet in my hand. We created a pamphlet as if, for fifth graders, with the bullets of a major story I just broke at The Intercept. I had to go to The Intercept because the Michigan outlets wouldn't pick it up. And it had Governor Snyder's press secretary, her phone was wiped right before the launch of the criminal investigation. Several officials in the environmental department, their phones were mysteriously wiped clean right after the governor held a press conference acknowledging, the water's toxic with lead. Health department officials, including the two top health officials, no text messages on their phone from 2014 and 2015. I don't know. It seems like destruction of evidence, possibly. And I went to the Flint Journal and I asked them, why aren't you covering this? Let's take a look.
Much been like a lack of interest in continuing through now.
In 2015, shortly before the launch of the Flint criminal investigation, we're in front of the Journal, and we're going to go talk to the Journal and make sure they know about it, and maybe ask why they can't find the time to talk about this. I'm going to speak with an editor or a manager here, or reporters. We wanted to make sure they knew about an important story. Okay, what do you got? We broke this a few weeks ago. I'm pretty sure the Flint Journal knows about it. We broke it in the Detroit Metro Times and the Intercept on Governor Rick Snyder's administration. Their phones were deleted right before the launch of a criminal investigation. Health officials' phones had no messages on them. Okay. The governor refused to hand over key documents. I mean, to be honestly, I know you guys know about it. I don't know why you're not reporting it. But also, the governor's top advisor was interfering in the investigation. Congress has responded to this story. They say they're investigating it, but the Flint Journal, interestingly enough, has not reported it. I don't know why. We also broke last year that the governor's top advisor was going around Flint offering payoffs to residents. Flint Journal didn't report that either. I'm sure you're a good fella, but I think the Flint Journal should inform residents about these things. None of the facts have been disputed. Rashida Tlaib, as you know, she spoke out on this. Michael Morris spoke out on this. Ro Khanna, the congressman, has spoken out about this. Erin Brockovich actually said, this is the biggest cover-up you'll ever read.
The House Oversight Committee responded to it, said they were going to investigate it. Of course, they did nothing. That guy looked like I had three heads. By the way, they already knew about the story. They just aren't covering it. And they're renting in downtown Flint from, I lost them. They're renting in downtown Flint from a real estate development company that is funded by the powerful foundation, the Mott Foundation, that I got on tape, the current mayor of Flint, saying the Mott Foundation pulled the strings that caused the water crisis. It's just, at a certain point, you just have to come to the conclusion they are all in on covering this up. And then you have to ask, why would people, many of whom, I would say most of whom, went to journalism school? I would have to think you went to journalism school originally with the mindset to do good, to hold people accountable. I was saying, Steve, you would have to wonder why, because I would think that a lot of these people went to journalism school, why it is they're in journalism if they're not covering massive bombshells like this. If for whatever reason you don't want to give credit to the other journalists who broke it, fine. Then follow up in your own way. But at a certain point, it just seems to me, whether it is to preserve their own jobs or that guy has an interest in the people not knowing, they're in on the cover up.
Yeah, I've been asking myself that for a really long time. It's not like journalism is a great paying job. So why are these journalists staying there if they can't write stories that are really impactful? Because I'm sure most people got in there because they sensed an injustice in the world and they wanted to be able to have, play a role in that. I think in a lot of newspapers, and I worked for MLive and I worked for the Free Press, I think there's this sort of groupthink mentality where you would get editors with these certain ideas of how the world works, and it sort of trickles down to the reporters, and no one really questions what's going on. And I mean, there are really, really, really good reporters at a lot of these publications, but at the top, where these decisions are made, these cannot be made by people who genuinely and sincerely want to report objectively about serious issues, as long if there's some kind of consequence to them, whether it's pissing off their advertisers or whatever it is. And I think that there's a lot of cheerleading that goes on. And, you know, the distrust in leaders, the unelected leaders of Flint, I mean, the actual people, the community leaders, is astounding to me. And I think that a lot of journalists will report from their desks. They don't get out. They don't talk to residents. So, I mean, just watching that documentary that you just aired, you're talking to actual residents. How many reporters are actually doing that rather than giving a call to the governor's office?
I was told recently, I won't name the reporter, but I was told recently from a source in Flint that a reporter with the Detroit News who has been reporting for like 7-8 years on the Flint water crisis just came to Flint for the first time to talk to a resident. Like, this reporter had been at the courthouse where the criminal trials were, but had never actually come to Flint to talk to a resident. And by the end of that conversation, the resident had this reporter in tears. And the reporter apologized to the resident saying, I didn't know any of this. So maybe they're chained to their desks because their bosses make them chained to their desks, writing about, you know, local municipal stuff. Maybe they want to go out and do investigative reporting and they're not allowed. I don't know. Maybe they're just too, you know, they need the health care. They need the money for their, you know, to pay the bills, whatever. But at the end of the day, why I keep stressing this is not because I hold the Detroit Free Press or the Detroit News or the Flint Journal in such high esteem and for my ego want them to cover my stuff. It's not that. I personally am perfectly happy to publish in the Detroit Metro Times. The problem is people have busy lives and most people are not into politics. Most people don't really have the time to know what's going on. And the only time they have to be informed is turning on the local news at night, you know, the local ABC, NBC, CBS. None of them are covering any of this either. In fact, in my book, I will expose that ABC 12 had documents showing a major health threat to the people of Flint 6 months after the Flint River switch. They had documents proving it, and somehow that story got killed. When if they would have published it, it would have saved lives. Let me repeat. The ABC station, and I've reached out to them many times. Why did you kill this story? Why did you kill this story? They don't respond. So it'll be out in my book. But most people either watch the local news at night for a few minutes or, you know, browse the paper or the paper's website.
Yeah.
They don't know enough to know, like, oh, these outlets are burying these stories. They just assume, you know, I could trust these outlets. So that's why I've always tried to get in these papers, because this is where most people are getting my and I'm sure you have felt this about Detroit. One of my biggest frustrations, what I want out of the book, because it's not going to be some New York Times bestseller, I just want the majority of Flint to know what happened, because the majority of Flint does not know who poisoned them and why. Most Flint, because they're not seeing it on the local news. I had evidence and people on the record that the governor of Michigan's top advisor, known as his fixer, was going around offering payoffs to sick Flint residents. We put the audio up in the Detroit Metro Times, your paper. Detroit News wouldn't cover it. Detroit Free Press wouldn't cover it. Flint Journal wouldn't cover it. I had phone calls, the phone logs between the governor, his chief of staff, the health director, showing them on the phone like a bunch of drunken teenagers 22 times in 2 days, 6 months after the water switch, and documents that showed prosecutors concluded they were covering up the deadly Legionnaires outbreak. You think that's a news story? None of them would cover it. So at the end of the day, when I say corporate media exists to cover up what's going on, I mean it. And it's not to say every last journalist is terrible or bad people. That's not true. I was at one point internally a rabble rouser stuck at a desk at MSNBC for a short, sad time, Fox News. I wanted to do these things and I didn't. And I stayed at these outlets for a lot of the reasons we're talking. You know, I needed healthcare. I was in my early 20s and was more interested in, you know, my social life. But at the end of the day, if you need a job, go do something else. Don't because they are the gatekeepers, and this is life or death information. I think people need to know this stuff. Any parting thoughts? Because this is not just Flint. Stuff like this happens in Detroit and elsewhere.
Yeah. I mean, I think that this is just yet another example of what is happening to the media right now. They're struggling financially, and they're hunting for clicks. And it's a lot easier to get your reporter to write 3 stories from their desk and hope you can get those clicks to make the advertisers happy. But what people don't realize is, if you become a part of a community by getting trust from people and doing those in-depth stories, people are going to come back and read it. So, I mean, there is a way to make this model work financially. But I'm really glad we talked. I think one of the things that you said yesterday absolutely broke my heart, and it was that you were sitting on a porch with a kid that couldn't count to 10. And that's one of the things that we're going to see for a really, really long time, is the long-term effects of lead exposure. It is going to cause so many problems, and it's not
over time. These outlets aren't covering right now that Flint has one of the highest surging cancer rates in America. It got like one news headline, and that's it. They're not even covering that.
Yeah. Well, thank God for you. I really appreciate you having me on, because it's people like you that are able to inform people in ways that you can. I mean, the fact that an out-of-state reporter is leading this coverage is both admirable and really sad. And I have much respect for you doing that. So I appreciate the opportunity to be on.
And I really, really encourage people, even if you're not from Michigan or Detroit, check out Detroit Metro Times, because if you want to actually see what like real, living, breathing journalism looks like, that actually is not fearful to piss off a foundation or a politician, Detroit Metro Times is doing it. I mean, they do great work. A lot of it's about Detroit and Michigan, but it's all the same shit. Government being purchased, government officials being bought off, environmental stuff, police, you name it. A lot of it's in the Detroit Metro Times. So people definitely check out Detroit Metro Times.
Many thanks. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate you.
Absolutely. Yeah. So that was Steve Neveling from the Detroit Metro Times. Now we're going to move on to another case of environmental genocide, and an even, I won't say worse, but a more active and recent cover-up, because this happened last year. And it is absolutely mind-boggling to me. Absolutely mind-boggling to me that not one outlet, and I know for a fact that there are major outlets that have confirmed my report from earlier this week. If you missed it, and smash the like button, super chats are appreciated. The link to pre-order my Flint cover-up book is in the under the live stream. The book comes out August 6th, but you could pre-order it now. And like I said, right now, behind the scenes, we are trying to schedule some book events, including in Flint, in New York, in DC, and possibly some other places. On Tuesday, I broke a story, if you could put it up, Colin, that the EPA, who for over a year has been telling the people of East Palestine, Ohio, and Western Pennsylvania, who were chemically nuked by a multi-billion-dollar railroad company, nothing to see here. We're not detecting vinyl chloride. Vinyl chloride is a highly toxic, cancer-causing gas, and Norfolk Southern detonated, unnecessarily, by the way, 116,000 gallons of toxic, cancer-causing gas over East Palestine, Ohio, and Western Pennsylvania. That toxic gas did not stop in East Palestine. It went to Pennsylvania. I believe, based on weather patterns, it went north. I believe it went south, and I believe it went west. I had people emailing me as far as New England that were having symptoms from chemicals falling out of the sky. Well, we broke a minor little story again that the EPA did recently detect vinyl chloride, again, a cancer-causing gas that Norfolk Southern detonated over East Palestine, did recently detect it in the soil at the derailment site. Over a year later, and did not notify the public. I obtained text messages. Colin, if you could go down to the bottom of the story, I'll just read the text messages. An EPA official sent a resident from Darlington. So Darlington is right over the border in Pennsylvania. Was text messaging with this resident who was nice enough to share the text with me, because residents saw EPA digging up soil by the derailment site, and the word was going around that they detected vinyl chloride. So this is Mark Durno from the EPA confirming regarding the VC detection. The whole reason that we are doing this massive confirmation sampling effort is to verify that the cleanup was complete. If we encounter an analysis of concern, we direct Norfolk Southern to deal with it. Also, you may want to let your folks know that the VC detection and dig out, saying we dug it out, was on the north side of the tracks, not at Ceram Fab, which is a building. All has been good over there to date. So she asked, have you notified the public? No, nothing was posted on our website. It's important to note that the VC was just above the very conservative screening level, whatever the fuck that means. When you dig it, she asked, what does the very conservative screening level mean? Is that the levels you sent us? When you dig it up, can it be put into the air, or would it just be contained? The first question will take time to explain, the EPA official said. I'm sure it will. Bottom line, though, they were set to be protective of groundwater. I don't understand the second question. Then he said, the levels are so low that any off-gassing would not be a concern, even to sensitive populations. We had no VC air detections from sampling during the activity. So, Colin, come on again if you can. First of all, you got sick at East Palestine, correct?
Yeah.
I was just there in April, so 2 months ago. I got a splitting headache. Fortunately, I do not get headaches. I never get headaches. I got a pounding headache within a couple minutes of interviewing someone inside their home. I felt delirious standing on a porch over a creek. Loopy, almost like a drunk feeling. I had pressure under my eyes. When I left East Palestine, it basically took 6 or 7 hours for my headache to go away. This was 2 months ago. So
it's almost as if when you go there, you go through a wall and you're just sort of in this weird haze until you leave, and you don't even realize sometimes you're in it till you leave.
Unfortunately for the people that live there and Western PA, they can't leave. They live there, and it's not so easy to just move. You need people to want to buy your home, which a lot of people don't want to buy a home that's just had a railroad nuke toxic cancer-causing chemicals. So I don't know, Colin, come back for a second. Does it kind of seem like a minor story that there is an EPA official admitting via text message that they detected the toxic cancer-causing chemical that they have been telling the public they are not finding? And
not only that, they said it'd be impossible to find.
Right. And that they dug it out? Is that a minor story that possibly an Ohio news outlet, possibly a Pennsylvania news outlet, possibly a national news outlet might want to alert the people to? Do you think that's a story?
Yeah, at least a third page story, any coverage at all of hey, this thing that the EPA said would never happen. It's possible it happened. If you have any readings of vinyl chloride, they're false. And then they're like, oh yeah, we dug some up. But anything else you see about vinyl chloride is false, even though we didn't tell you about this, which implies there's probably other times they've dug it up and not told people. As long as
this should be a front page story in every news outlet in the United Corporations of America. It should be on all outlets, because this is a life or death matter. This is a cancer-causing chemical. Let me read from the story. According to the National Cancer Institute, exposure to vinyl chloride poses an increased risk of a rare form of liver cancer, as well as primary liver cancer, brain and lung cancers, lymphoma, and leukemia. Beyond the direct threat of vinyl chloride exposure, when it's burned, it produces carbon monoxide, hydrogen chloride, carbon dioxide, and phosgene. Phosgene has been banned from use in war because it was used as a chemical weapon in World War I. You cannot use it in war, but it was released as a result of detonating 116,000 gallons of vinyl chloride. Number two, the EPA is not a public health agency. The EPA is not a public health agency. And frankly, the CDC doesn't seem to be one these days either. So Mark Durno, who is telling the resident, yeah, there's no risk to digging out the highly cancerous soil. Yeah, it's not going to go in the air. He does not have any expertise to tell the resident that. He's not a health official. But I talked to actual toxicologists and health officials, and they vehemently disagreed with Mark Durno. Let me read from the story. Harvard-educated chemist Stephen Lester criticized the EPA's minimization of digging out soil contaminated with vinyl chloride, their oversimplification that they detected low levels of vinyl chloride, and accused the agency of hiding critical public health threats from the public. This is from Stephen Lester, who is a Harvard-educated chemist and an expert on chemicals like dioxin and vinyl chloride. Quote, the idea that it will not be a concern to excavate the contaminated soil does not make sense. It flies in the face of what has been occurring in East Palestine since the derailment. Many people in the town became sensitized to the chemicals released into the air and waterways by the derailment. Digging this area up will release vinyl chloride into the air and will pose health risks to the people living nearby, especially to the people who have become sensitized to the chemicals. This should not be ignored or brushed lightly aside. They're reluctant to share information and they're hiding things that they find. They should do an announcement with something like that to share it with the public and to share what they found in terms of the concentration. If they were to share the contamination numbers, other people might have a different opinion. They don't want me or anybody else who doesn't think along the same lines as they do to see these numbers because we might share a different opinion, and that creates a political and community problem for them. Judith Zelikoff, a toxicologist at NYU's medical school, kind of knows something about this. Quote, vinyl chloride released to the soil is expected to volatilize or leach into groundwater. Most vinyl chloride that is spilled in soil or surface water, like lakes, ponds, and rivers, evaporates into the air quickly. Vinyl chloride in the air breaks down in a few days, resulting in the formation of several other chemicals, including hydrochloric acid, formaldehyde, and carbon dioxide. Once it's in the environment, vinyl chloride is broken down by sunlight in a few days and changed into these other chemicals. Erin Brockovich concurred that digging out the vinyl chloride posed a risk to residents. Vinyl chloride is dangerous, which is why they were aerating the streams, Erin told me. She added that the EPA's silence is their response, referring to the agency not notifying residents after it detected vinyl chloride. Leslie Pacey, an environmental investigator with the Government Accountability Project, denounced the agency. The EPA has a duty to protect public health and a duty to warn residents of potential health threats. The moment the EPA found the vinyl chloride, they should have alerted the public. And now that the information is leaked out, it's time to come clean about all the details of the vinyl chloride discovery. This is Flint 2.0. I don't know what other way to say it. Why I have said repeatedly, I stay on Flint, because if they get away with it in Flint, this is going to be the playbook elsewhere. This is the playbook. This is the playbook they used in Flint. They're using it here. And by the way, Mark Durno, the official that texted this woman, this resident, admitting it, he was the EPA's cleanup guy in Flint. And he lied to residents in Flint. Go ask them what they think of this Mark Durno character. Colin, can we show the graphic of all the outlets that before I even broke this story, that I pitched it to? I pitched it to the New York Times, no response. I pitched it to the Washington Post. They did respond. I'll tell you in a minute. I pitched it to Rolling Stone, no response. I pitched it to The Guardian, no response. I pitched it to ProPublica, no response. I pitched it to The New Republic, no response. I pitched it to HuffPost, no response. By the way, I pitched it to all of them, showing them I had text messages from an EPA official confirming that they detected vinyl chloride and did not notify the public. The Washington Post reporter or editor got back to me. Here's what he said. Jordan, we are going to pass, but thanks for bringing this to our attention. What does that even mean? We're going to pass on alerting the public that the EPA detected the cancerous chemicals that they claim they're not finding? We're just going to pass. It's not our cup of tea. So I responded, if you have that, respectfully, you're going to pass on the EPA not notifying residents whom they've been ensuring they are not detecting chemical contamination, that they did detect a highly toxic toxicant, and they won't tell a journalist what levels they detected or when? That's another thing. The EPA would not provide the date they detected it, what levels they detected it at, how far into the soil they found it, because depending how deep in the soil it is, will inform us whether the groundwater might have been contaminated with vinyl chloride. They won't tell me. I said residents are sick in East Palestine and the EPA is withholding important public health information. I'd be happy to do this story with a Post reporter. Colin, you know, if you and I were driving around and I said, I'm hungry, and we see the exit, and I say, how about Wendy's? And you say, I'd rather Taco Bell. That's kind of like, I'll pass. I'd rather this. Or, I don't know, you want a drink? We just wrapped a busy day, a 16-hour day on the road. You want to get a margarita or something? I'll pass. What does it even mean when an editor says, I'm going to pass on informing the public that the EPA is withholding life or death information?
Yeah, it's straight up just admitting that you're going to ignore it and just move on. Unless, as you said before, if you found a way to tie like Trump or Putin to it, then maybe they have like a AI keyword that if it doesn't have those keywords, they auto reject the pitches, maybe.
I mean, it's one thing if like I pitch you, I don't know, an opinion piece on something. This is beyond public service. This is critical public health information that the people of East Palestine need to know, the people of Western Pennsylvania need to know. I believe the Department of Justice would need to know. Maybe not all of the EPA is aware of this, and it's a cover-up within the EPA. I don't know. And you're going to pass? But it gets better. It gets better than that. Let's tell you all the outlets I've sent the story to after we published it, because I had to publish it on our own on Substack. Cleveland Plain Dealer. East Palestine is not far from Cleveland. The Akron Beacon Journal. East Palestine is not far from Akron, Ohio. The Columbus Dispatch, about hour and a half, 2 hours. Cincinnati Enquirer. The Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, not far from East Palestine. CBS station in Cleveland. ABC station in Cleveland. CBS station in Youngstown, Ohio, not far. NBC, Steubenville, Ohio. News Nation, which has, to their credit, done a good job, stayed on East Palestine. Colin, how many outlets you think have followed up on this?
I'm going to go with my at max one.
I will say Rich McHugh, he's a reporter with News Nation. He did tweet out the story. He's a good guy. He has been one of the only reporters that has stayed on this. He's been to East Palestine several times. He wrote, last month, we at News Nation reported independent testing found vinyl chloride in the air outside an East Palestine residence home. More than a year after the derailment, EPA would not comment. Shocker. Now this bombshell from Status Coup. I know that he passed it on to his bosses at News Nation. As of now,
I think Jordan's stream died there. Um, so while we wait for him to come back, sometimes his internet just bloops, but I don't want to continue his rants because he's doing pretty good. So while we wait, he was talking about the EPA, and we'll actually have a clip from he actually talked to the whistleblower Christina Sisseloff, who is the one who had those texts with Mark Durno, and so this was part of their conversation about that.
I had a couple other people reach out to me after you contacted me this morning, but
Oh, journalists.
yeah, journalists.
And what they have to say. You don't have to say too
Well,
much, but
they asked about the vinyl chloride and they read your article and they wanted to know more about the story, to know the whole story.
I would too. Maybe
yeah.
the EPA should provide information.
The one thing I have with that is, and it's a hard time deciding who to talk to about it, because it's just like we've been doing this for over a year and they come around when it's convenient for them. And even like local papers or local news, you just want to know whenever it's convenient. But at the same time, like I just told somebody earlier, we're people and we've gone through something that is a real situation. And we're not like the next big news story, or we're not like a science experiment, though we've become a science experiment now because we want to know more information about what's going on with us. But like, we've been calling out to people to hear us for over a year, and they were here when it happened. They were here for the 1 year anniversary, and then we'll see you maybe in 5 or 10 years. So
And
All right. So looks like Jordan actually lost power. So he said he's actually going to finish it because he had a lot more to rant about. So he's going to finish this up at a later time. But definitely, guys, I'm going to link it here. Be sure to check out the full Substack. I'll link it here in the chat. That goes over, has all the text and links different videos, both we've covered and stuff like that on this subject. And make sure to share that where you can, because corporate media is not going to cover this, so it's up to us to sort of share it around and get as many people to see it, to share it on Twitter or Facebook if you still use that, or Reddit, anywhere you can to share this story, because it's been 1 year and they just found it and more vinyl chloride and hid it from the public. We don't want this to become another Flint, where in 10 years we're doing the 10-year anniversary of the Norfolk Southern derailment and the giant cancer cluster that is now in East Palestine and all that, and residents are just left to fend for themselves. We want to try and get the word out to cut this off at the root and make sure people are aware of this so that it doesn't happen in their towns as well. But yeah, check out the story. If you can, support us as a member, statuscoup.com/join, and that you can join our members call, see previous recorded members call, members content. Once you're a member, just highlight the member tab on statuscoup.com and click member only content. We also have I also throw up wallpapers and stuff on there for you guys. But yeah, thanks everyone for thanks for joining, and we'll see you guys next time.